Hello, I'm David Rhinelander, the host of Democratic Dialogue. Welcome to our program, and I'll introduce Mike Wheeler, who's our guest today. Mike, why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Well, it's interesting. We were talking last night. We have one thing in common. We once, at different times, worked for the Gloucester Times. You as a reporter, and when I was a little kid, delivering papers for them. So
you delivered all those nasty words I wrote?
This was even before you were a writer, I think. But we go way back in Gloucester. And one other tidbit, we often at our Democratic City Committee meetings are down at the Gloucester House. And there's a picture in back of John and Jackie Kennedy. Ben Smith is in there.
Yes.
That was 1958 when Kennedy was running for re-election to the U.S. Senate against Vincent Celeste, who was largely and probably appropriately forgotten. I'm down there that day. I'm out of the shot, but I was there in 1958. And
about this high?
A little higher than that, sophomore in high school.
Oh.
And so I go way back in Gloucester and also actively involved in Democratic politics.
Well, I go back to the Ben Smith era when he was given the seat when Jack became president, so that his little brother, who was too young to be a senator, would be old enough finally to become United States senator.
In 62.
Yeah, he sat at Teddy's seat.
But I think that we're looking at something today as vast as our experience has been, that's unprecedented in terms of the upcoming election. And when I talk to people about it, they say, well, wait a second, we just had the 2018 election.
Exactly.
Do you know that the first presidential debate will be in June of this year? It's only months away. So we already have on the Democratic side a bunch of announced candidates and speculation about many more. I don't know if you've tossed your hat in the ring or not.
We have 20 candidates or something. I can't even remember who they all are. So.
That would be an interesting test, wouldn't it? But the fact of the matter is, there's so much uncertainty, and so the stakes are so high, and this is such a different political environment than at least I can recall ever seeing.
Absolutely.
I think we need to get our arms around it and figure out.
So let's talk about the whole process between now and the November election, 2020 election, because how are we going to winnow it down from 20? And this last election, the fact that the Democrats took over the U.S. House with a huge variety of new representatives. I mean, it's amazing. So how are we going to sort all this out and get it down to somebody who can beat Trump?
It's a different process in that all those elections are district elections from state to state, and the political climate is different in those. We have this strange electoral college system still in this country that gives weight to some states more than others. But this will be a standard election in terms of the procedures. So a number of people have announced on the Democratic side. There's even some chatter that Trump may have a challenge within the party from Kasich or other people like that.
Okay.
So we're not lacking for candidates, and they'll ultimately be winnowed through the debates, which I say start in June on the Democratic side. In less than a year, the Iowa caucus will have been held. We'll be about a year away from the Massachusetts primary right now. So things are afoot. And those primaries will elect delegates to the national convention.
To the convention. Right. Now, when is the Massachusetts primary?
In March of 2020.
2020, yeah, okay. All right. And that will elect, the people running will say, I will vote, I will go as a delegate for Joe Schmo, and the other guy will say, I'll go for Judy Du. So that's how they'll be, right? That's the way it used to be.
I hope we can do better than Joe Schmo. I'm just going to go out on a limb there, but that's the way it goes.
Yes.
And there have been some changes this year, so that I was a delegate in 2008, an elected delegate, and was out in Denver.
Did you go? Did you?
Oh, most certainly went. It was very exciting. I was committed to who became President Obama, and it was a very uplifting time. We were coming out of the George W. Bush years. It looked placid at this point. I'll say editorially. But at that time, and even through 2016, you would have the elected delegates like me. I had to run for that spot. There was a big caucus. There were a few hundred people there.
Right.
I never was assistant treasurer in the third grade at Riggs School in Riverdale, but so I'm one election, and I'm not going to push my luck on that. I went there, but there were also people, so-called superdelegates,
Yes.
who, by virtue of holding political office
Right.
or being very active in the state or national committee, had votes as well. And there was a lot of concern this past election in
Yes.
2016 coming from the Bernie Sanders people that, wait a second, we should have elected.
We have delegates. That's right.
We have delegates, and
the
those
super delegates were too super in one sense. Yeah.
Well, the idea was, and you can debate this back and forth, that there ought to be some continuity. There ought to be people who are in it for the long term, and are actually thinking about the party as a whole.
Well, do what the boss tells them to do. I mean, that's been one of the problems of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
It's been sort of boss controlled for in a way for many, many years. And the idea now, particularly this last election, it was a people's party. An amazing election. So that's changing.
I was about to disagree with you because it's a very different thing from what we think of Mayor Daley out in Chicago, the smoke-filled room.
Sure.
But these bosses don't smoke,
Or
and they're eating
Massachusetts.
kale or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But they clearly are the establishment,
Right.
And I can see pros and cons to having that counterweight there. But the interesting thing is, you'd mentioned the number 20, I believe, in terms of how many people are likely to run. I think we're up to 8 now, and when we go home for supper tonight, it might be 11. So
I look in the paper every day and there are a couple of new faces, and I think, wait a minute.
absolutely. And one question is how that's going to work.
Yes.
It's more than I can ever remember, but when I was a kid, I wrote a book called Lies, Damn Lies, and Statistics about public opinion polls.
That's how you got into your business. You never did introduce your profession, so that's you're into statistics.
A little of this and a little of that. But I covered the 1972 election up in New Hampshire, and that's the election in which George McGovern got 35% of the vote. Muskie got 47%, but because Muskie was from next door in Maine, the thought was that actually it was a loss for him.
Yes.
But there are lots of people.
Yeah.
You could spend a long time walking Main Street and say, who is Sam Yorty? And he was a candidate. He was the former mayor of Los Angeles. That was a field of certainly 10 people.
In the New Hampshire primary.
In the New Hampshire primary. We had, going on a limb here, but I think we had 5 serious candidates in 2016. Obviously, it came down to Clinton and Sanders.
Yeah.
But, 20. And what the Democratic National Committee is going to do is, with their debates that are going to start in June, is have, if there are 20, have 5 people on the stage at each time, and so they'll have a series of these, and people get a little bit of airtime, and somehow or other people are finding Iowa very fascinating. People are running for election and going up to New Hampshire and so forth.
Well, New Hampshire always, but
Iowa comes first.
But now New Hampshire is no longer the first. That's what I was going to say.
First in terms of Iowa's a caucus state, and New Hampshire is a standard primary, where people Republicans can move over and take a Democratic ballot, and vice versa.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Which is kind of an interesting sort of thing. People could do a lot of mischief, I suppose, in terms of that. But we're going to go through that process, but instead of having a car drive up and the candidates get out, they're going to need a bus.
Yes. And where is the National Convention this year?
I can tell you where it is this year. There isn't one. But 2020, you've got me stumped.
2020, excuse me.
And I should know, but they tend to like to pick, and they pick years in advance. It's already been decided.
Yes, I know.
States that are, what do they call them? Purple. That the presence of a convention there will be helpful. So I went to Colorado for Obama, and Obama turned blue. The 2016 convention for the Democrats was North Carolina because they wanted that state. And
That's right.
It didn't. It was, slightly went for President Trump.
Well, now, when let's just jump ahead now, and we now have a Democratic candidate, one candidate running against the president. How do you think? What are the big issues for us as Democrats to focus on to try and down Trump?
So let's put a little asterisk. Maybe we'll come back to this or not.
Okay.
It's not certain that it'll be Trump, right? I mean, you nod your head. It's not certain it'll be Trump because we've got the Mueller report coming out.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can imagine the landscape changing.
Yeah, well, that's true, and he could be impeached by then. That's true. I think it's unlikely, but
I agree that it's unlikely, but it also could be a very different kind of campaign.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Yeah.
If it turned out that it was the not Trump Pence ticket, but the Trump Putin ticket that we were looking at there. But let's take your thing that the notion is that he's the incumbent, he's nominated, and so forth. He beats back Kasich or anybody else. There's also talk of Mitt Romney challenging him.
Yes.
So I wouldn't take that as a given.
All right. Okay.
But the convention will pick somebody in 2020 to be the Democratic nominee and a vice president.
Yeah.
So when I look at the roster of people who are running, some of them may know that they've got a snowball's chance in terms of getting the thing, but maybe vice president, maybe secretary of this or that.
Yes.
So,
or maybe just influencing the ticket in a sense and moving it in a certain direction. I mean,
fair enough. But I haven't forgotten your initial question, which is what the issues might be.
Yes.
If you look at the issues that concern us, people don't like. But Trump himself is down in negative land in terms of more people disapproving by a significant matter than approval. But on substance, the Democrats very strongly have the popular side of the issues, and so I think part of it is an issues campaign, clearly, in terms of sensible foreign policy, economic justice for people, respect for civil rights, all those kinds of things. But if you give me the choice, I want to find somebody who will be respected and accepted even by people who haven't necessarily voted for him or her. The leadership part, right? So you can have somebody with whom you agree absolutely totally on the issues, but even you find them to be a cold fish or something.
Or just impossible to win,
Yeah, though there are always surprises in that too. So there's the pragmatic thing. I love.
Yeah, and I would like to see somebody more in a sense. I'm a liberal Democrat. I always sign myself off as a liberal, but I think we need somebody more in the middle of the Democratic thing, so we can bring. There are a lot of dissatisfied Republicans, and I think we need to persuade them to vote, to look in the middle and say, hey, this is not a bad person.
Let me give you a yes and on that. I understand I understand that impulse, and there's a little of that in me as well. And you're never going to have somebody who aligns with everybody perfectly. Probably not even everybody in your house. So. But I also think there has to be some genuine respect that the person who's holding that office, you may disagree with what he or she is doing. And speaking of she, there are a lot of very qualified women on our side who are either have announced or who are about to.
And going into the House of Representatives is absolutely amazing. Yeah.
I just interrupted myself, didn't
Sorry.
I?
Sorry. Yes. So I added to you.
I should apologize to myself.
I added to your interruption, but thank you.
But I also think this business of leadership, and I was no fan of George H.W. Bush, but I never doubted that he was trying to do the right thing, that he had some understanding of what the issues were. Mm-hmm. I'd say the same of Gerald Ford, who came in a very difficult time after the long national nightmare of Nixon
Of
and
Nixon, yeah, absolutely.
hyperinflation and division over the war.
Yeah.
So neither of those people were scoundrels or venal or anything of that sort. I think that's important.
Yes, I agree.
And that's important so that they can get something done. It's important so that we're not at each other's throats. And that kind of respect is something that I think is earned to some degree or forfeited in the course of a campaign. When the poor governor of Texas couldn't think of the third,
Yes.
Yeah. Whoops, so that scratched him from the ticket. Though I guess the bar has been lowered significantly in terms of what's disqualifying in this day and age.
What?
Yes.
Is there a bar at all?
Looking down at that. So I'll be curious to see how that is played. The other thing that's happened too, social media came into play in the 2008 campaign, and the Obama campaign was particularly good at identifying their supporters and so forth, getting them out and energized and so forth. That's ancient history compared to what's happened now, positively and to a larger degree, probably negatively in terms of how that plays out. So there could be somebody whom you and I couldn't name if there were, a pie about to be smashed into our face, who suddenly catches fire, who is galvanizing, exciting.
Yes.
And you may not agree with her or him exactly on the issues, but gee, they've got something in them that just smacks of integrity and honesty and
position. Yes. I've been sort of looking at that when I go down the list, and nobody's jumped out of that list at me yet.
Good, right?
That's it.
Because if they did, then you close your mind, and there might be somebody else who comes up, and we haven't really seen them tested.
Yeah. Or there are a couple of people on the list who I'd love to see do better, but I just don't think they have a chance. So there's no point.
Obama didn't have a chance.
Well, that's true. That really is true. Yeah.
And it can, people can blossom and then fade. I remember years ago, some columnist for the Globe said, "Forget the primaries, forget all that. We ought to give people a test." And there were a number of different things you'd have to do, including it's 5 p.m. and you got to change the tire in your car on the Southeast Expressway. Let's see how you deal with that. Really put people under the
work.
gun. So I worry a little bit that we've gotten so sophisticated about self-presentation and I feel your pain and all of that kind of stuff. It's hard to necessarily to see the genuine person.
Do you think, because of the spread that's clearly now, between Trump and the rest of us in a sense, what do you think the chances are of getting a national American feeling back together again, so that we are a nation going in, sort of agreeing in one direction?
I think it's going to be a long process, and for all that FDR did, and he had an amazing legacy on different things.
Yes.
To some people, he was always that man in the White House.
Or he was a traitor to his class, or all the other
exactly.
things that were said to him.
Good as far as I'm concerned. Roosevelt, they would call him.
Absolutely.
So there's a point where you're not going to get, and probably shouldn't have, the whole country infatuated. There ought to be some semi-loyal opposition there.
I think opposition is I've always, as a reporter, I'd always talk to somebody who disagreed in a sense.
Yeah.
Because it would add to the story, and it would also help me think a little better. So yes, I'm not trying to wipe out the opponents, but I think we've got to get I hope we get some kind of a broad feeling of
here.
One of the things that worried me recently, the last few years, is that, for instance, New England, the Democrats of New England were very different from the Democrats of other parts of the country. So in a sense, we didn't have a national party. And I think that's...
You remember you're too young to remember Will Rogers, but...
No, you don't either, sir.
That's true, but I remember who he was. He was a humorist and greatly loved in this country. He said, "I'm not a member of any organized party. I'm a Democrat. So if that
well, that was true of the Democrats. That's true.
yeah, so that's long been the case. It's been a big tent party.
Yes, exactly.
There was in the New York Times not
good.
so long ago a full section with pictures of all the women who are now in the House or the Senate, and I think I'm close to the number 131. And then you look at, and these are women of different color, different religions, and so forth, of different politics.
Right.
And then you look at the Republican side of the House. It looks like you and me, for Pete's sakes. We can do better than that.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a factor too in terms of mobilization. It certainly was true in terms of this last time around, finding, as you said at the top of this show, new people who come in with freshness and energy and so forth.
Absolutely. Yeah. And opinions, and they're willing to speak.
I was mentioning Kennedy in the Gloucester House earlier. You remember in his inauguration, everybody remembers the "ask not what your country can do for you."
What you can do for the country, yes.
But I thought the telling part of that speech was a torch has been passed to a new generation, and it was that Eisenhower wasn't quite old enough to be his father, but there really was a gap there. And this is against my own self-interest. There isn't a Draft Mike committee out there. But
thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I think our audience might have said phew. But this is an impossible job in terms of governing this country. It's utterly impossible. And
the
presidency. And I understand that people of our vintage or 10 years younger have wisdom to contribute and so forth. But I feel strongly that we need somebody young and vital. And we don't have, put aside the president's policies, he's a little old for the job.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the Democratic candidates, as good as they are really too old. I mean,
that's my view. We're ageist, I guess.
But that's because we're so old,
Because we know what it's like.
We don't. Anybody under 30 can't. What's that all about? Yeah. No, but that's true. I mean, that is a problem. But I would just hope that there would be some. I mean, I have friends who live in abroad. One of my sons lives up in Halifax. So I grew up there, and they don't know what America is anymore in that sense, And I would just hope somehow or other there would be enough of a unity in 2020 to have so that America is a known country again, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely, and I think one of the, you were asking about my background. I teach at the college level, and my field is negotiation.
Right.
To be a good negotiator, you have to have something to offer. To be a good negotiator, you've got to be able to make commitments, and people know that you hold to them.
Yes. You've got to know how to maneuver people.
do we have a stronger or closer, literally and figuratively, ally than Canada? And yet we've gotten into a fight with Canada, for Pete's sakes. Right. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And we're so cozy with the Russians, who are not our friends. It's just topsy-turvy. So I can understand why your son is saying, "What is up?"
But look at what's going on in Europe too. I mean, they're having the Brits. There's this whole sweep through countries now of sort of upset. I mean, people
absolutely,
and it's an international issue now. So
it is.
Is it all going to settle down into one?
Oh no, it is. It's very frightening. And you'd hope in an ideal world we'd be the beacon of stability, integrity, and
that's how we were.
We could model it, and at our best, that's where we. That's where we were.
We were, and that was our. Some people didn't like that, but the ugly Americans are coming again.
Oh, there's that side of it as well. But if you think about the Marshall Plan and all of those things, the country did a great deal of good for the
absolutely.
globe.
And the European. I mean, when I went to Europe in the 50s, people would remember the Marshall Plan and say, sort of shake your hand as an American and say, "Boy, you don't know what you did for me." So yeah. Boy, what a business! So, what do we do as good Democrats now between now and month and month and month and month and month? What are you going to do to to
Well,
help the party and help the people in the party that you want to that you hope will get there.
In the recent election, I supported a number of candidates out of state. These were people that Seth Moulton had identified in the Serve America PAC. I've kept in touch with with them, and many of the people that he and his group supported got elected. Some did not, but they haven't thrown in the towel, so I'm eager to see where they go.
Good point, yeah.
Then I think there's a lot that we can do here locally in terms of mobilization so that we are a resource for our immediate neighbors in New Hampshire, further up in Maine, or down in Maine, I should say, and other parts of the country. So I pester my friends who live in different states with news and updates and so forth. I think that's part of it. And I think we could be loud and clear in terms of the things that we believe in and that we have lots of company on in terms of the key issues that I touched on earlier.
Do you think there is enough? Do you think I think with in one sense, I think some of the amazing things that Trump says helps us because people sort of say, he couldn't have said that. Wow. So I think in one sense, let him go on because he's digging his own grave. Now that may be optimistic, but
could be. And I think too, when you're saying what should we Democrats do, I would ask people everywhere to just pay deep attention. I mean, we're talking about this now in what normally would be relatively early in the election cycle, but we've covered why that's not the case. Yeah. The game is on now,
Absolutely.
And need to understand who the players are. We need to get that done. We need to understand. I'd love to hear from the secretaries of state, including our own Secretary Galvin, how we can be sure that our elections are honest and that my vote counts.
Is counted, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
What's happened down in North Carolina, where ballots were actually stolen and thrown away, is repellent. It's just awful. Yeah. And I would hope people who are in the center don't identify with, even Republicans would say, that's disgusting. Yeah.
All right, we got to wrap up, but just please, everybody, remember to vote. I mean, the critical thing now is to think about where you're going to go, but actually get out there and put that piece of paper in the slot and have it vote, because we certainly need to turn out Democrats and even moderate Democrats. I think
and independents.
And independents, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, listen. Thank you, sir. I hope we can do. I hope we can do well, and I thank you very much for coming and spending half an hour with us. That was
great to enjoy your company.
Terrific. Thanks, Mike.